Do we have places? Okay. Do you need me to page them? Okay, thank you. All right, and checking in with the conductor. You all set? Have a good show, Maestra. Three places? All right. Let's do this. Have a good show, everyone. Stand by house to half and house out. House to half. Go. Lights 2 and house out. Go.
And moving forward into the modern time, I was telling you the other day that because of the way that my schedule had worked out, one of the last live theater pieces that I saw before we entered this strange new era was on Beckett in Los Angeles.
Thank you for
Kirk
coming.
Douglas. I thank you for doing it. And then I didn't see much more on stage before this all happened. And then the next thing I knew, you and I believe Christopher Fitzgerald were doing one of the sort of first of the new Zoom pieces. And I remember thinking that it was so wonderful that you were someone I trusted so much, like yourself, was bookending the experience to almost tell me that it was going to be all right. I was like, well, the last time I saw this man, he was, captivating an audience. Now he's inside this box. We can all do this if Bill Irwin can do this. What was the genesis between you and Christopher of doing that piece? And did you know that you were kind of setting the tone for many months to come, or did it feel like it was a one-off and would kind of fly by?
Oh, well, it was all day by day. As we remember back in the early pandemic, it was a moment at a time. People would call you up and say, could you just talk into your iPhone and then we'll post that. That was our first response to the lockdown. And then full credit or blame, Barry Edelstein from the Old Globe Theater called and said, what is your response to this moment? He was the one that introduced me to Zoom. I didn't know what Zoom was until Barry put me on a Zoom call. And then I immediately felt I have to try to make a theater piece out of this Zoom experience. By the way, Ryan, I'm hopeful that it's a little footnote in theater history. I hope we'll be reading and vaguely remembering Zoom theater before too long. At the moment, it's all we have. It's a little bit like living on a ventilator. It's not actual theater, but it's our impulse. It's our best impulse to do theater in this time. But yes, we just, Barry and the Globe put Fitzgerald and I together, and we tried things. Interesting point of craft, because it was fascinating to hear Carla Knudsen talk about theater craft and how she approaches things. We found that to make anything work with any kind of natural feeling rhythm, we actually had to push it. We had to push the Zoom technology so that as Fitzgerald was finishing something, and it would be terrible to do to a colleague on stage, but I was getting ready, so I come right in. And that was the only way that we could build, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But otherwise, you get, as all will remember from the early Zoom theater days, you get this kind of, if music be the food of love, play on. And then the other actor goes, yes, and I'll respond now. It was an excruciating form early on. And what we found, again, is we had to kind of artificially push it in order to get any kind of back and forth rhythm. And like I say, I'll be glad when it's a footnote in history.
Another thing I would have checked with my writing staff if I had a writing staff is, and it's fine if you don't, do you have something musical you want to show us in the episode today, or are you, I see the guitars in the case. I didn't know if you had an instrument nearby and you were going to play something. If you're not, ha! Are you ready to roll right into it, or do I need to like cut away, or?
I can go right into something.
All right, well then, what I'll do is I'll do this. I'm gonna introduce you as a musician now because we've seen you as the actor. All right. Meanwhile, Chris Bass says, thanks for the shout out, very sincere. Chris Bass, I got you covered and I appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the screen the musicianary talents, that's a word I should never say again, of Nygel D. Robinson.
So this is a song that a good friend of mine named Barry Anderson wrote. And he wanted me to sing it, and I was in disbelief, much like when Chris talked to me about Godspell. It's a song called One More Chance, and when I heard it, I was like, I love this. And then he was like, well, we're going to record it and make a video, and it's like my first single. So, you know, I owe him everything. I sing it everywhere because I think it's a brilliant song. And I'm so happy that he thought of me to do it. So this is a song called One More Chance. It's on Spotify and Apple Music and all those streaming platforms. So if you like it, go check it out. But here's a song. I see lovers walking down the street and I get envious because I'm way romantic but incomplete without the two of us. But I won't blame you for singing a brand new song. I like na 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 na. 'Cause baby, I was wrong. Give me one more chance to make me worth your while. Give me one more chance to prove to you that love is still my style. No one but you can make me dance like na 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 na. And give me one more chance. Give me one more chance. I was too caught up for the champagne dreams to know just what I had. Now the heaven we made ripped at the seams, and it hurts so bad. But I won't blame you for singing a brand new song like na 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 na. 'Cause maybe I was wrong. Give me one more chance to make me worth your while. Give me one more chance to prove to you that love is still my style. No one but you can make me dance. I'm like na 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 na. Let me tell you, my biggest mistake was making your heart ache. I love you for all of my days. Let me count the ways. Give me one more chance to make me worth your while. Give me one more chance to prove to you that love is still my style. No one but you can make me dance. I'm like na 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 na. Na 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 na. Do 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 na 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 na. Na 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 na. Would do na 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 na. Just give me one more chance.
Now, you're intimately involved with two canons that I know a lot of people really, really love, especially as they've sort of emerged into populist entertainment, which are the rock musical and the actor-musician show. Because I mean, obviously,
as you were just talking about.
Yeah, and someone had a Sweeney comment ready the second that we started the interview.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that was a very big moment. I mean, that was a very big moment for the actor-musician show. In a lot of ways, I think it popularized it. Patti LuPone playing an instrument was suddenly I think these performers you would never thought of in that way just sort of changed the way that people associated with them. I do have a very, very quick question about Tommy that I've always been curious about, because the book is credited to Des and Pete.
Mm-hmm.
And the album, which I'm of course obsessed with, the album has some very specific lines of book. I mean, there's like a sardine, an egg. And early on, there's the care to play, love, suit yourself. There's like the little interstitials that get us from piece to piece. Were those done before you hit previews on Broadway, or were those being added to sort of make the piece make more sense as you were in rehearsals? And how done was that when you hit the stage on that?
It was very, what we read on the first read through, the first day in La Jolla, was almost exactly what we did on opening night on Broadway. There were some tweaks made between La Jolla and New York. I believe My Own Eyes was written for Broadway. I don't think we had that in La Jolla. And there was a few little changes to kind of beef up Tommy and make him a little, give him a little more swagger in the latter parts of it. I think Roger Daltrey felt like Tommy was a little too wimpy in the La Jolla version. But for the most part, it was all finished. And that was because Des had gone over to London and sat with Pete, and really the two of them sat down and really decided what the story was. And it's funny. Pete said that he gave an interview when they were recording Tommy to a journalist, and the journalist asked him, so what's the story? I know this is a concept album. Shh, quiet. I know this is a concept album, but so what's the story? And so Pete told him the story of Tommy and the story of the album. And then when they went back to sequence the record, Pete had to go back to that article to see what he had said, because he couldn't remember what he told him the story was, because he was just kind of half making it up as he was going along. So in the original, you don't have to answer certain questions when you're making an album. Ken Russell's film was as much about Ken Russell as it was about The Who and about Tommy. Right. And that story, how were you going to do the baked beans, but so when they sat down to make a stage version, a Broadway version, Des, being a consummate theater practitioner, knew that you needed to answer more things for the audience, and so he sat with Pete and they really crafted it all and just handed it to us, and then our job was mostly figuring out how to make that be alive and how to make that work. And it was really interesting because that was my Broadway debut, my first experience with something like that. And yet it was a new musical. And then the next new musical I did was Titanic, which could not have been more different, could not have changed more from the first day to the last. I mean, huge. It was more like what usually happens with a musical, mm-hmm. and numbers are cut and whole, characters disappear or come to the fore, or all the stuff that you would do out of town normally, and we had to do in town in New York. And that was fascinating to see Maury Eston and Peter Stone kind of craft that and throw big chunks of scenery and all kinds of other things out. Fun Home, I guess, was the culmination for me, where Janine and Lisa have, I would say, at least another full musical's worth of book and songs that anybody else would give their eye teeth for, and they were just so courageous with it. It might be a brilliant song, but if it wasn't the right brilliant song for that moment, and they didn't necessarily know what they were going to replace it with, but they knew that this wasn't right, and they had enough confidence in each other and themselves to know that, well, we'll just keep working until we figure it out. So those three things were such a great lesson and such a cool thing to be able to observe up close, as an actor, and to be part of helping determine what those things are eventually. It's so wild. It makes me think about Shakespeare now when I think, Bruce does this one thing and it's like it's in the text now, but that's really just because I did that this one day and he became a part of it. And Tommy does this thing, and that's because I did that in rehearsal one day, and it makes me wonder, like, how many things in Shakespeare are because Richard Burbage just was like, oh no, Bill, not going to say that. I'll just do something like this.
The quills come out. Exactly. And scratch, and add. The Fun Home being a great example. I think the way you're talking about the artistry behind it, the creation of the music and the book, it's so finely measured, and their casting was so phenomenal. I mean, your performance in that was so finely measured. I think that the whole show felt exactly of the weight that it should at all times. It felt like the scales were always very even on what was being shown to you. They're mm-hmm. being shown to the audience, and the speed at which the audience is sort of brought into the dynamic of the characters. And having not been familiar with the graphic novel before seeing the show, a lot of it was surprising to me. Bruce's final act was a complete surprise to me, and it was wonderful to see such meaningful theater that was being measured out, which is obviously the creators having a very steady hand.
It was. I think it gives the impression, as it should, of being inevitable. But having been a part of the process through years of its development, I can tell you it was anything but inevitable. But but that's what you aspire to have it arrive at a place where it feels like, yes, of course it had to be that, and yes, this had to happen. The fascinating thing is being there at that moment before you figure out the thing that it has to be, and do the other three things that it might have been, but turned out, not quite to be.
But what you've done with the name is pretty extraordinary. You've won a lot of awards. I say congratulations for that. You've won some awards. You also you had a successful Kickstarter. You opened a building, and not to be dour, but like you got a building open just before all of this insanity. What was the journey to, like, where had you been before? How did you get into the building, and then what has happened now?
Yeah, we were nomadic for like maybe almost 2 years, and we kept going wherever we could find a space, and we plug in a stage and put up the lights, and a lot of our time and energy was spent on just physically moving around. And at one point we're like, enough is enough, let's get a building. We met this incredible woman who had been coming to our shows, who had some property, and she was looking for a tenant, and she gave us a really good, like, decent rent, which was incredible of her. Her name is Ashley, and she used to have a yoga studio next door. Anyway, so we did a Kickstarter. We all together raised maybe almost $50,000, which is incredible. And we feel so grateful for that. And then we opened, I think it's 16 days before we shut down for COVID. So we had 16 glorious days.
Wait, I knew it was close, but it was literally March 1st, like it was right around there?
We opened February 29th, which is a Saturday night, was a leap year. So yeah, and we stopped. We were probably one of the first groups to close. I think the last show we did was March 12th. So I don't think we even had a full 16. I like to say that because that's when the city shut down, but we're pretty conscientious, so we shut down early. We're like, whoa. And we thought it was going to be, 2-3 weeks. Yeah, I'm sure you too.
Oh yeah, well, because we had we had cast Light in the Piazza, and we had it on hold, and like we kept sending these very optimistic emails, like, well, we're gonna delay it another 2 weeks. We kept making sure the whole cast could move. And so it was that moment. I was like, Jen was like, we really have to push the button and just say, this thing is not happening.
Yeah.
And I think as artists, we get into so much of what we do is a struggle all the time, that I think we get in this mindset, like, no matter what, show must go on. So it was really weird to just have to send an email that said, no, it's actually not at this moment. Yeah. Now,
absolutely.
did y'all start with the first time that I think I ever heard of the company producing? It was for some of your members were on trolleys, and it was a very. Can you remind folks that may not have ever seen it what that was?
Remind people / let them know for the first time, which is we wrote a sketch show called A Complete History of Savannah for Morons. And it was just a play, like a fun play that went through chronicled the history of Savannah in 62 minutes. And it was really fun. We were basically like poking fun at Savannah's history, and mostly poking fun at ourselves, which was a blast. We loved it. The show sold out every night, and we had a trolley. One of the shows, someone came up and said, I work for a trolley company. Can I put you on a trolley? And we're like, oh, but we're improvisers. We say yes. So we were like, let's try it. And we had a blast. It really made people happy. The nice thing is we could always change the show. They were incredible. It's called Kelly Grayline.
Oh, sure.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, they have never once given us a single note about the content of the show, which is really fun. And so we just do what we want to do. Not to brag, but it totally took off. We have 1 billion reviews, and they're also positive. We're like, whoa, improv sucks. Trolleys are where it's at. But no, it's just been a lot of fun. So that's that was an arm. And I think in general, like, we don't just see ourselves. We are an improv theater for sure, but we're content creators, and like, not in a cheesy way. We just like making stuff with people we like. So if that turns out to be something like some of us are writing a musical right now. We're filming a sketch, like a short, later in the month. We started doing game shows online. Like, we just want to make stuff and have fun and collaborate. So that's kind of the name of the game.
You are epic. Mary, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's Friday. That's nice. I'm really thrilled to be here. And I'm such a big theater person that anytime I get to talk about anything in that proximity, I'm pretty jazzed. So
yes, I actually, and I did ask you here to talk about theater, nothing but theater. I know that some people know you from television.
Yes.
As you have made an impact on a show that many people are very fond of. We're not going to talk about it because I feel like when I googled to do some background, I found you talking about this show for what is literally looks like hours and hours of color commentary. So we're not going to talk about your show, but we are going to set the background of our conversation to something that should make you feel at home.
Excellent.
Great.
I love it.
I should have. It looks like those feet are coming out of us, which
Oh my God.
I hadn't planned, but
Well done. It was meant to be. We were meant to be on this bridge. And then we've got little Saru right in between us. I don't know if that's
that's right. It's like that's the epic Doug Jones, yes?
Yes. I keep pointing the wrong way. Yes.
It's like,
there we go.
yeah. Oh, trust me. It gets Doug's over here.
There's Doug.
I feel like
I almost had it. There you go.
I feel like when they were putting, I love all the treks. I'm just a trek guy, but I feel like when they were putting the cast for Discovery together, they were like, who is the most eclectic, absurd collection of performers that will delight Ryan particularly? they're like, you know what? Let's get Doug Jones.
Yeah.
And we could stop there because Ryan would have been thrilled. But then let's also get Anthony Rapp.
Yep.
Let's get Mary Chieffo. Let's get the room.
Yeah.
So I don't want to talk about this show at all. It's just gonna be a backdrop. You went to Juilliard.
I did. Indeed, I did.
Tell me, I'm really curious to know at what moment in your sort of upbringing that became a spark, and then also for those we have people watching who are in their teens or thinking about what they want to do either for their undergraduate or their graduate. What connected you to it, and how did you end up there?
Cool. It's a fun story because, and I know we're going to talk more about my family,
who I'm very fond of.
Yes, as am I. We're a little trio. I'm an only child. It's lots of good stuff. But they are both of my parents are actors. And my dad, in fact, he went to Juilliard. I am the first legacy in the drama division, in fact. In the drama division, we do group numbers starting with 1. And he was in group 6 and I was in group 44. And so that is in answer to your question about how I was introduced to the school initially. It was something that I would hear the term occasionally. It wasn't something, there's obviously the school has had many different reputations throughout the years. My dad was definitely someone who he came in straight out of high school, 17, skinny kid from Long Island. And he says that he was a little too young and naive to really be traumatized. But it was something that I had been aware of. And then when I, as I said, big theater person, pretty much from the beginning, but really got into it in middle school. I got into a musical theater program, Milliken Middle School, a great public middle school right near my house. And then high school, I had an amazing drama teacher, Josh Adele. And 10th grade, we took a trip to New York because my dad grew up there. My mom moved there from North Carolina at 19. And we were in the area. We were on the Upper West Side, I guess. And my dad was like, do you want to check out the school or do you want to see? And Kathy Hood, their administrative director, who is the loveliest, gave us a personal tour. She was around. My dad emailed, through the alumni. He had that address. And I was, and still am, a very rigorous student. And yes, I'll end with that. But I came in being like, I literally said, like, how is the academic rigor here? And Kathy, bless her, was like, well, it was going to be a BFA for me.
Right.
Coming out of high school. So she said, you would have a liberal arts class every semester. But we find that the rigor in the classroom, outside of the academic classes are just as intense. And she was not wrong. But it really actually was great timing because in 10th grade, like I said, I was taking all of these honors, APs, all that stuff and doing theater. And it really reset my mentality on what I was doing in class and how it was applying to making me a full human being and an artist. And so I'm grateful for that, regardless of whether I ended up going to the school. But then as, 11th grade, starting to really look and apply, I really started to feel that a conservatory program was what I wanted. Because for me, it was that transfer of all the rigor that I had in all my classes, but in a concentrated medium that I knew I really wanted to be a part of for the rest of my life. And of course, I got very nervous before the actual auditions. And I applied to a few other. North Carolina School of the Arts was my other top choice. I really liked their program. And then a few other schools, but I knew that Juilliard, I did another tour later on. I felt it in my gut, like walking in the halls, there was something that felt akin to me. And while yes, my dad had gone there, it felt very specific to who I was and how I was developing as an artist. And then, audition, they have a very thorough audition process. They used to have a cut system that they don't have anymore. So now it's just, you have an initial audition, a callback that day, then a final callback weekend actually at the school. When I did it, I think it was 2.5 days. Now I think it might be 3 or 4 days. Of course, everything is not the same at this exact moment in time. Right. I don't know what they're going to do next year, but I made it through that process and kind of walked away from that weekend feeling like, well, no matter what, I feel like I learned a lot and this was incredible. And then it ended up being the right fit. And something my drama teacher, thinking of all the students who are looking at schools right now, something he said to me that helped me so much, because literally we finished a rehearsal for the musical The Boyfriend. If you're aware,
the Julie Andrews, Sur la plage.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
that's buried somewhere deep in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I was Madame Dubonnet, the headmistress, of course. I haven't pulled that accent in a while, but after one of those rehearsals, I remember going to my teacher and being like, Mr. Dell, can we talk about auditions? And he sat me down, and something that I've taken with me for every audition since, but particularly with schools, was they're auditioning for you too.
Yeah.
And I kind of came in maybe a little bit too much on okay, what do you got to show me? But of course, they ended up showing me that they were the program that I wanted to be in and thrive in. But yeah, and then the rest is history in many ways. But I definitely found that I'm a very physical, vocal actor. Like that kind of all-encompassing training was something I really craved. And that's something that is one of their strongest suits, is it's about the full body. I'm very cerebral, so I need to work on everything else.
Right.
Get out of that so I can be present in that. And I really found that to be true.
I'm fascinated to ask you some of the questions that I think maybe not everyone else has asked you, because part of the whole reason of having this show is that we have a really enthusiastic and robust audience in Savannah that I can't wait to get back to. I'm in New York until things in the South improve a little bit more. But they love theater. They love to know people's trajectories. So I know that they can YouTube you and hear about Hadestown and about Great Comet. I want to talk about a show called Small Mouth Sounds for a moment, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah, which is a show I've been thinking about a lot lately.
As have I. In fact, there is, I believe that's the Ars Nova cast?
This is the Ars Nova company. Yeah, the original off-Broadway company.
For someone that is, and I do have a picture I want to show because this is my favorite from the off-Broadway run of Hadestown. For someone that is so connected with visuals and sort of an auteur director's eye for the way that tech is crafted, I was astonished when I saw Small Mouth Sounds about how tiny, how precise, and how so I was hoping you might talk a little bit to what it was to come to a show that required you to do so much with so few words, and how that kind of affected your maybe your normal process or a process you would have approached another show with.
Yeah. Well, so first, for anyone watching who doesn't know, Small Mouth Sounds is by a writer named Bess Wohl, extraordinary writer, and is set on a silent meditation retreat. And so the vast majority of the show has no words. There's like a few moments where the rules are broken, and there's like one absolutely glorious, devastating monologue where someone is allowed to ask the teacher a question that becomes this aria. But otherwise, yeah, it's a wordless show that I have to say, I have never laughed as hard as I have during a process as I did during Small Mouth Sounds. I mean, I think I literally did pee my pants multiple times, and so it ended up living in this place where there was absolutely huge elements of slapstick, and then just devastating. And I equally, I have never worked on a show where going into the first preview, I had as little understanding of what the audience was experiencing as I did with Small Mouth Sounds, because of course I knew all the backstories and the moments to look for, and I had worked in excruciating choreographic detail with the company, because we had to guide people's eyes, because usually you would look to whoever is speaking. But of course there were no words. So stuff was literally like, Jess, you're gonna pop the chip bag and then you're gonna hold while you listen for Marcia to roll over and Sakina to sigh, and then Eric, you'll cough, and then Jess, you're going to reach in and grab the first chip. I mean, it was really that choreographed so that you could get sort of all the bits. And typically the way we rehearsed it, and I should say, I don't have a process. Like one of the great joys of the eclecticism of my career is the fact that I get to be a different director for every show I work on. And so Small Mouth Sounds was definitely a continuation of that. But I don't know, we would just I'm thinking about the very opening sequence where everyone enters the room, and we would just run it like hundreds of times. You know, it began with Eric, the guy with the red handkerchief around his neck, I think, and then the two women who are lovers, who are sort of split up here because they're fighting in this moment, you know, and one by one they would enter, and like on the third or fifth time, Brad, who was the hat guy, tripped coming in, and it was like, you know, doublingly funny. And so then he tried to do it again the 6th through the 20th time and screwed it up, and it didn't work out, you know. So you're like, there's a lot of retrofitting back to how, you know, what had happened during this magical time. But it meant by the time we got to performance, it was excruciatingly detailed in its mapping.
Did your did the PSM have notes on that mapping? Because I know you remounted it at Signature about a year after Ars Nova, if I'm tracking, because I saw both productions and obviously didn't know it well enough the second time to see the complete transfer of everything. But was there a map that you put on the new performers and the returning performers, or did you just reinvent it? Okay.
No. There was, I mean, to a certain extent, of course, there was some degree that we had to reinvent, because every performer is different. But a number of the original cast were able to do the commercial transfer, and then we had to seek performers who had internal chemistries that related to the chemistries on which we built it, because there, to a certain extent, there was writing that was the play, and there was writing that was the production, and the production as a whole, obviously including the play, was what had done so well, and so we wanted to hold on to that. So yeah, we sort of, the way we approached that process was we basically vomited at our heroic performers either this choreography that someone else had invented, or choreography that they themselves, you know, a year and a half prior had invented, and then had time, once they knew it, to figure out their own navigation through it. And so of course then it changed and breathed and stuff, but we began from that.
I love it. It seemed like such a perfect hop to go from literally being at one of the juggernauts, one of the very few crossover companies that has off-Broadway houses and a Broadway house and works inside of the not-for-profit model, and both, to go to a significantly smaller budgeted but just similarly well-respected and sort of deeply impactful company. But I did want to talk about Roundabout, because I think a lot of people may not know that there are there are fellowships at the large not-for-profits, and it occurred to me when I was doing some background for our interview that it was really such a rare and beautiful opportunity that I think a lot of career directors never necessarily get, where you got to be inside of one sort of company's embrace for the calendar year, but you were working on Shepherd on Broadway, and you were in the Roundabout downstairs working on a show with Margot, I think. Like it seemed like your programming was taking you all over their operation, and it seemed like a very keen way to learn the ins and outs of everything from their black box to their Broadway house. What was sort of your experience? I mean, sort of taking it from the first day on the job, working in those different spaces. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so for that fellowship, it was another like moment of transition, right? Because before that, I was a directing apprentice at McCarter Theater, which is a large regional theater in Princeton, New Jersey.
Oh, great one too! Just fantastic company too. Yeah.
No, I will say that I've tried to be very intentional with trying to learn the ins and outs of different theaters different theaters at different levels, and I'm really fascinated by process. Yes, intentionally constructed. Yeah, that was well said by Rachel.
I love the circuitousness of that. That makes me happy.
Yeah. So where was I? Anyway, so I've just tried to be really intentional to which theaters I try to engage with, and really for me, I'm so fascinated by process, and I've been really fortunate in my time in New York to be able to be be really deeply involved in the creative processes in some rooms, and then also like the fly on the wall. So with Roundabout, that was a very big step for me, because I went from being a directing apprentice at McCarter, where I was very immersed in the culture there, and I worked administratively in the artistic office, but then also was in the rehearsal room. So it was like a great step in my career. But Roundabout was really the first step that I took in being like really planting my feet as like an artist on my own. Roundabout with the directing fellowship, they really treat you like an artist in residence for the calendar year, and that was major for me, because while at McCarter, yes, I did get to learn a lot, and it still had much more of like an educational component. And Roundabout was like, we trust you, like we're here because we believe in you as like a fully vetted artist, and that was just like incredible. Especially like for me, I'm like, to give a little background about me, like my parents are from Cuba. I'm a first generation, college student and American to the United States. And so to be in an institution that large was just like a really big milestone for my community, for the Central Florida community, and also for like the Latinx community, I would say, and then also for like my family, So yeah, I definitely learned a lot being there, and the fellowship, all the things you mentioned, like that is intentionally designed in the fellowship, because the goal is that you are able to assist on an underground show, which the underground is their new works development space. It's their black box. And so that's where like a lot of emerging playwrights get to have their first big New York debut. And that's a really exciting space for me in particular. And then also working at their larger off-Broadway space. And then I did get my first Broadway credit through them working on True West, which was such an incredible experience.
Good. Let's get right to it. So, Danny, you are a lot of people know you from a lot of things, in that you have made this incredible sort of multi-medium career for yourself as a character guy, but also as a leading guy. In funny roles, you've kind of run the gamut. I want to kind of come out of left field and ask you about a show that I didn't know about until I started doing some background for our interview, which was your Broadway debut, Song of Jacob Zulu.
Wow.
It's a show I didn't know anything about, that you were part of the original team to have brought from Steppenwolf. And it's a show that once I started reading more and more about it, I'm obsessed with the creative team, and of course music and lyrics were by Ladysmith Black Mambazo. Knowing that this is something that was a little bit towards the earlier part of your career, I'd love to hear about how you came to be associated with it, what it was like making your Broadway debut in a show with such starry collaborators. What was that process like?
Wow, Ryan, you have gone deep into the bag, my friend, and that is awesome. I think that is great. You actually went deep, and you picked out one of my favorite moments in my career. Really, honestly, the song of Jacob Zulu. This was a amazing, 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 amazing thing to be involved with. We started in Chicago. I want to say it was around 1991, maybe 1992-ish or something like that. And we were at Steppenwolf. It was a big thing for me, it was my first show at Steppenwolf. I had grown up theatrically in Chicago. I grew up physically in Indiana, and then went to school at the Poole University in Chicago, and then came out and started, working around Chicago. So, I had worked at a few theaters, Goodman and, Victor Gardens and different places. But this was my first show at Steppenwolf. And lo and behold, here's Ladysmith Black Mambazo. They're like here, right? Zakes Mackay, the incredible South African actor, so known for, his work with Athol Fieldguard, is in the play. I'm working with like Chicago legends and icons, Pat Bowie, Patrick Clear, wonderful, wonderful actors. And then, we put it to bed. We did it in Chicago, put it to bed. Then a year later, Oprah Winfrey and other people, Paul Simon, all this stuff, they want to take the show and bring it to Broadway. But first, could you please go to Perth, Australia, and play the Festival of Perth, which is like, this massive, incredible arts festival that takes place every other year, however they call that, in Perth, Australia, on the Indian Ocean, So I was like, yeah, well, I'm down for all of that. And, I was a younger at the time. I think I was, 29, 30 years old. And all this was coming. And this was the project that actually brought me, after we came to Perth, to New York City. So we arrived in New York, 1993, Song of Jacob Zulu. We're like, hey, we're going to take on the world. We got this killer show. We got Ladysmith Black Mambazo. Zakes Mackay is my boy. We're going to do our thing up in here. And, we show up with a show about a boy who blows up a shopping market in South Africa, in the freedom struggle. And, to our misfortune, the World Trade Center bombing, the very first World Trade Center bombing, had happened like 4 months prior to our arrival, with this story that is asking for sympathy for a young African National Congress, ANC, they want to call, quote, terrorist. Some might say freedom fighter. This is what theater debates. We show up with this show and it was like, oh, wait a second, this is a show about a terrorist blowing up shit? Wait a second, we just had a terrorist blow up downtown, I don't know if I like this, Yeah. So it was a great show, a great production. Ladysmith Black Mambazo plays this Greek type chorus, telling this story that envelops about this young boy who starts off as like a preacher's kid and ends up, blowing up a shopping mall, as a freedom fighter for the ANC. And it's about the whole, dilemma that war and politics can leave person personal.
So I'm hoping for those that have not been to Savannah or don't know the theater scene, you are Collective Face Theater Ensemble. This is the website, I believe, below. I want to make sure I've got that in. Great.
Yes, correct.
I'm trying to get my history right as well. Does Collective Face go back to its very beginnings in Enchanted April at the church? Or
yes,
was that number one? Okay,
that was number one. That was the first show we ever produced was at Epworth, which is no longer. I think they're making it into some kind of apartment artist commune complex thing.
Okay, good.
Up in the Starland area of Savannah, and but that was the first show we did. A few students that I attended SCAD with, Richie Cook and Anthony Valdez and Kristen Long, at that time, and me, we decided to form a theater company in Savannah, and that was our inaugural show. I was teaching at Savannah State at that time, and I was approached by the pastor of the church at that time, and he said, well, my theater sort of department is kind of dying, but I would love for you guys to come in and maybe do a show. And I said, okay, here we go. And that's how it ended up happening.
Well, it was one of those things. The show, it opened. I remember watching its press journey. It opened with good advanced word, and then just the word of mouth really took off. Somewhere in there, amidst all the stuff you've been doing on stage the last couple of years, you managed to also produce and star in a film.
Yes.
Which I have a screen cap from it. The film is "Oh for a Muse of Fire," and this is a screen cap. My question to you is this you acting in your responsibility as a producer or in your responsibility as an actor?
Both.
Okay.
I think, it was actor, but I was tapping into my producer anger.
Now, I always tell guests that they don't have to list all their own plaudits, because I will for them. This is the picture that I have found of all the things that your film accomplished in its first run. Could you, for our audience, give us a little bit of a sort of a quick overview of what the film is and where you can see it in this very strange era where we don't go to theaters anymore?
Right. Well, so I forgot your first question.
The first question is, what is it about? And the second question is, where so can one person like myself find it to watch?
I was like, I know you can see it, but what?
No, well, we could also just make it a mystery. You could only tell people where it is and say, you won't know what it is until you buy it.
Exactly.
It's like Amazon.
It's on Amazon. No, it's not on Amazon yet. But it's.
Why'd you look at me angrily when you said that? It's like, it's not on Amazon yet. It's like, I don't control that all. But
well, Brian, I have high expectations for you. I need you to work your magic here. So it was mostly an idea that came from my collaborator Pete Rowan, who I met in the audiobook world actually, but he went to film school and we've been collaborating. This was our third film together. So we've been, messing around for a while, a little bit at least. And every film we learn something. But this was about kind of a struggling artist's journey. It's not autobiographical, although, there have been times where the struggle's been real, but just kind of tapping into how do we stay inspired, and that inner critic that we have in our heads. How much good are they doing? How much bad are they doing? If we got rid of them, what would happen? What's their function? What's their role? And so we created a short film, 11-minute film about it. And we shot in Maine, Moosehead Lake. So it's really beautiful. If nothing else, watch the film just to see a beautiful lake.
You're so ahead of the curve. You did an outside production and then you shot a film in Maine, which is now suddenly well known as, one of the safest places to be in the United States.
It really is, yeah.
And one of the most beautiful as well. So, and it is where? It is available where then, if not Amazon?
So we premiered at the Maine International Film Festival. So got to go to a drive-in and see the big screen, and but it was also kind of at the height of the pandemic, so there wasn't as much filmmaker socializing as I would have enjoyed, but everybody was staying safe, and that was a really good thing. And then it was part of the New York International Short Film Festival, and that was online for quite a while. The other film festivals that we've gotten into, we're waiting to see if there's a way to do them in person, just because there's only so many times you can go online and do that whole thing. It's just been a really interesting year, I think, for a lot of film festivals and film screenings. So I don't know if some of those are going to get pushed to next year. So hopefully there'll be some big screen opportunities for people who are in the New York area. But as of now, I do have it on my website, so you can go there.
Wait, I can go to your website and watch it right now.
Go to my website and watch it, because we've done the online thing. So anything that happens now will be in person and part of that festival.
When did you start acting? What do you do when you act? And what ungodly thought process was it that made you create an organization to try to bring us all together? Tell us about that.
Well, the initial time that I started acting was actually my son was involved with the Savannah Children's Theater here in Savannah. He was taking a class show. They do these class shows, and he himself didn't actually grow a passion toward the theater at all. But while we were there, someone behind the desk said, "Hey, we have some auditions." And I said, "Well, he's not interested, so he's not going to do an audition for sure." But they said, "No, we want you." And I said, "So, okay, sure." So long story short, I was in Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, not, of course, the Into the Woods Cinderella, which is also amazing. And your past guest has done 2 princesses, I believe, in recent years.
That's true. I try not to bring up the obvious things on my show, but yes, my last guest was one of the princesses in Frozen, one of the originals.
Nice.
To grace the role.
Yes.
She's watching in the green room, and she's smiling.
Oh my gosh, I just feel so amazed and astounded that I get to share this small cubicle space with Anna.
With a real honest to God princess.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Chris, you're changing the subject from talking about yourself.
And I do that. So basically, I've been acting here in the Savannah community for almost 10 years. And about 2 years ago, during our final performance of Mamma Mia, I felt the urge to...
Here we go again.
Oh, what am I doing?
No, you said the name of the show, and I said, here we go again.
Here we go again. Yes, exactly. Very good. I felt the urge to bring it home and try to talk to the community at large about what's going on, what everybody's doing, and really try to form a place in between all the different theaters where they could talk to one another. So at that point, I came up with this idea of the Savannah Performance Project, which was a calendar of events. Yes, not very easy for me to say, but a calendar of performance events here in Savannah that gets the word out there about what's going on, and lets everybody know that not only the community knows that performance is going on, but the different performance groups know that each other is performing and can kind of plan what they're doing and not try to overlap each other so much.
But the interviews that popped up because of the culinary training that the company went through, and because of sort of the high wire act of the food preparation. I mean, it kind of reminds. It's like David Cromer's Our Town on acid to be doing that much food prep on stage. The phrase showed up again that you are the director of Impossible Plays. When I first was introduced to you, someone told me you were the director of Impossible Plays. I am wondering, I'm very curious, did you create that? Was that given to you? Do you believe it's true? How did that happen?
It's a great question. So I had worked with a company called Studio 42, which was an off company in New York City. And they were sort of going through a regime change, and they asked me to take over. And I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. Why would I want to do that? But then they sort of convinced me to do it. And it became clear that if we were going to continue to exist through a regime change, through, a new format, we had to really have a reason for why we existed. There's so many theaters in New York City. So what made ours unique and special and different? And at the time, I knew a lot of writers who, had one really great play that every theater loved and would do a reading of, but they would never produce because they would always say the same word in the rejection letter. It was unproducible. It was either too big or too complicated or too risque or too, irreverent or too impossible in some way. So we were like, well, why don't we be the home for those plays? Why don't we demonstrate that you don't actually need all the money in the world to do impossible feats, and that an audience might be really excited to see something on stage that they didn't realize could be possible, and that you wouldn't see if you were just sitting around on your couch at home. And it kind of stuck. I don't really, because I led the company, that sort of came home to me. And frankly, it's, those kinds of artistic challenges and getting the designers and actors working together to figure out how do we do this, how do we even begin, was really exciting to me.
When did you first transfer the gift you have into your professional career? What was that moment?
I love saying this. I didn't used to like saying this. I was embarrassed about it, but I'm a church girl. And I love now as an adult, I really love being a church girl. That was an experience that you can't buy. So my mother was an evangelist, and I used to warm up her audience at the age of 6, and I was a hit. And so that led to me singing in church. And from there, I went to a high school of music and art. I went to Arts High School in Newark, New Jersey, where I was raised. And from there, I moved to New York. And, the whole, the backstage in show business magazines I was turned on to. And the rest is history. I did a lot of auditions, and I thought I really wanted to be in the theater, but unfortunately I couldn't dance. Well,
confessions. Here on this show, you're hearing it, folks.
But in the the sense of really dancing. I mean, I could move, but I couldn't dance. And they would always say, well, she's got a great voice, but she cannot dance. So fortunately, at those theater auditions, there were also producers that produced music. They would sneak into those auditions and listen for singers. And it was during the disco era, and that's how I got started recording.
Till next time. Great stories, great theater.